All right, what's up, everybody? It's Thursday. It's 12:04 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. A little late, not so bad. This is your MOCA Weekly Town Hall. I'm Max. I'm happy to be here. To my right is Untitled XYZ. Below me, Daim Al-Yad. We should be getting Renee in just a moment. And yeah, let's hit it. What's up? How are y'all doing? Hey, Renee.
Hello. Hey, Renee.
Yo.
Hi.
What a week it's been, and I mean that completely facetiously. I was hoping we could talk or start on something that Untitled and I were just kind of chatting about, which is that it's NFT NYC this week. And for the first time, at least in my experience being in kind of like this NFT world, I was mostly unaware, and it did not seem like there was the same kind of, I don't know, vibe that we're used to with NFT NYC, which I feel like is always kind of postured. Also, hey Anubis, postured as much more of this like the premier kind of gathering of NFT crypto people, and I feel like that mostly passed under my radar this year. And I don't know if we want to get into like what our guts say about general vibes and what that may communicate. Untitled, you're nodding. Maybe you want to add something.
Oh no, it caught me nodding. I just nod in general, just instinctually. No, I think like, I mean, I'm in New York. I've been in New York for a very long time. I've been to pretty much every NFT NYC since. Actually, I think I saw Renee moderating an NFT NYC panel in like 2018 or something, way back in the day. But I think. Yeah, I haven't been very involved this year in anything. I haven't gone to anything. For some personal reasons, I just had bad overlap with the timing of events. But generally, like, I think I will go back to what I've always said about NFT NYC is that Times Square is a very frustrating place for New Yorkers to visit. And on top of that, I think it's a very like commercial center to be talking about NFTs, and it just rubs me the wrong way generally. I would much prefer for us to have meetups in neighborhoods and talk about like NFTs as artwork, as murals, as installations, focus on the gallery side and less on the kind of commercial side of like, let's go to Times Square and see stuff up on a billboard. I know that impacts people very differently. Internationally, Times Square means a lot of different things for folks. Mm-hmm. I think for me, though, that's one of the reasons why it just has always kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Is it feels like Times Square is for ads, not for art, and I wish I would hope over time we migrate away from that.
Yeah. Have any of you had your artworks in a Times Square environment? I certainly have not.
Momentarily, I think I hit something of mine on one of the big, I don't know, I guess, you know, ad displays on one of the buildings for probably maybe several seconds. Definitely less than 10 and probably less than 5. I'm with you, by the way, Kirk, on the whole NFT NYC commercialization implication thing, and I also wonder if this year they may have, I don't know, partly shot themselves in the foot, or maybe I should say a bit more than usual. I think I remember. I don't know. I think they have this whole platform and like, I don't know, like artists showcasing web app thing that they were like trying to push early in the year. And for me, I wasted like an absolutely ridiculous number of hours trying to get it work, thinking it might lead to something in the end. And it was like sort of loosely tied into applying to show art at NFT NYC. And like my issues were centered around their system basically not being able to sensibly handle like I think something was messed up because I had an account that was tied to my wallet, but I had an account that was tied to my email, and for some things they needed to be able to email you because they were sending you confirmations, but I couldn't tie my wallet to my email based user account because that wallet was already tied to an email-less account that I couldn't add an email to. And like it was this bizarre, ridiculous thing. And even though I got assistance from NFT NYC guys directly by like Twitter DM, I wasn't able to get to a point where I got it working in an amount of time that I was willing to, continue wasting on this. And I spoke to at least two other artists who basically had similar frustrations along very similar technological hurdles. So I wonder if maybe they, changed some of their like, I don't know, application process and kind of, frustrated people out of putting in the sometimes surprisingly high amount of necessary effort to just try to participate.
Yeah. I think if I can add on to that, like there's okay, I'm going to make a bunch of conjectures and y'all can tell me if they're completely off base, but there has been in my experience with NFT NYC a kind of like these tripartite spheres of influence and intent, and I think all of them are kind of necessary in order to kind of make this a thing. And I think there's kind of a structural problem with each one. There's like the conference NFT NYC, which is very very financialized. Like that's kind of its thing, right? It's not even like the PFP world, although it's more kind of in that frame of reference, right? There's the like kind of commercialized artists, which Daim, that's what you were talking about, which is like these Times Square billboards and this reason for artists to come to New York and kind of see their work on the big screen and take their pictures and amass their influence and meet maybe their collectors. And then there's kind of like Untitled, what you were talking about, these like kind of satellite events that I think end up bringing people like us either into New York or, out of our boroughs in Brooklyn to see these people who we have relationships with. And I feel like you kind of need all three of those in order to like have this kind of sterling event. But Daim, I think you just so beautifully evoked that on like the commercial influence side, the ease and simplicity is not there for artists in like a commercialized sense, because probably the incentive on the business side isn't there, right? To build out like a really quick, easy, approachable system, right? Whether that's because there's not enough money or there's not enough effort. And that's going to stop a lot of artists from making like the trek to New York, which is going to make these kind of satellite events a little bit less populated and discourage more people from kind of like making the trip out, and it's going to lessen the kind of impact. I also think that in a lot of ways, at least this year, from what I was watching, on the art side, like NFT NYC seems to have been market corrected by NFC Summit in Lisbon. It seemed like a lot of people in our kind of general MOCA circle, a lot of the artists we admire, were going there, and that was kind of their like,
Absolutely.
this is the place to meet, this is the place to like have our actual conversations, this is the place to like be with one another and look at our art and talk about our art. And that was what, 3 weeks ago. I wonder if perhaps like the more insular focus of a conference like that, more towards the creative, cultural, artistic side, kind of, like I said, just market corrected what NFT NYC offered more because it was like a nexus of like interpersonal meeting than the actual event itself.
Yeah,
I didn't go to NFC Summit, so I don't know personally. Sorry, Untitled.
no. I think you're right. I mean, the whole scene is maturing, right? You have like, and that's honestly a good thing. Like we have all these different parts and facets that are starting to emerge and be independent in a way of one another, but still make up the total. But yeah, I think, I mean, generally it's good. I think it's like you have artists who are going to be drawn to maybe more of these kind of creative niches of events or places, more maybe places more like outside of New York City in some cases. It's certainly not an affordable place to have an event like this. Like it's the tickets have been in the past super expensive, but also, you know, it was 103 degrees here the other day. Like it gets hot. But yeah, I think I mean we're seeing this across crypto at large. It's like there's the kind of commercial applications of this stuff. It's folding into very institutional sort of adoption. There's still the kind of grungy artist realm of things. There's then the more traditional commercial artist realm of things. So there's a lot of different applications of this, and that's ultimately, I think, a healthy thing.
Yeah, well, obviously, I mean, what we're seeing with, I think is a lot of the institutions that have traditionally been responsible for like holding these kind of like nexus events and meetups are starting to blur these lines and kind of not know where they sit. Like Super Rare is a good example, as they try and kind of, for survival's sake, push more into the commercial artist realm and away from kind of the, I don't know, more grassroots crypto art OG vibe. OpenSea, as we have attested to, has completely foregone, I think, anything other than like market viability or, you know, lowest common denominator appeal to as many people as possible with a, you know, generalized and unspecific product. So these kinds of, and you know, obviously there's so many PFP projects that are like either on their last legs of finance or are completely, you know, all talk and no action. So I don't really know what this kind of event that has been really important to me and meeting people and, you know, what's the word, making more sturdy like the, I don't know, very wishy-washy kind of online world of crypto art. Like I don't know if maybe it has the legs to sustain itself, Untitled, like you said, because it's maturing. But like Renee, I know you in the past have come from Germany to New York for NFT NYC, and I don't believe that was even a possibility or discussion this year.
No, not really. Like back in the days when we were pretty new in the space and you had to go out to meet people, like that was the time where I was like at NFT NYC in 2018. Oh no, it was 19. I think it was like a nifty conference in Hong Kong where I met the guy who founded NFT NYC, and invited us and other crews who've been in Hong Kong for the first NFT conference ever, which is how they called it, to his conference, which was NFT NYC in early 2019. And as everything was so new and it was very important to, and also obviously super fun to meet those people again that you met at the conference before, like, and, you know, make those connections and refresh those connections. And then over time between the conference, obviously you meet new people online, which always was the primary thing, so that you can then at the conference meet up in person. And like this flywheel between digital, where the space was born and where everything is flourishing 24/7, and the like moments in time in the physical world where you then meet and talk and share insights and explain what you've built since the last conference, or maybe continue building new stuff on hackathons. Like the mix of those two things was kind of like the magic in the years between 2018 and COVID, when it, at least for me, slowed down with conferencing. Yeah, that was the talk. I was
I-
like on stage with Marguerite from
Yeah, I
Blockhead
found a
Games.
picture. There's Renee on my phone with Marguerite.
Wow.
That's so funny. I thought I still had it. That was cool because I did some graphic design work for Neon District back in the day.
Yeah, that was so cool. Like I remember we finalized the presentation at the place of Devin and Alex the night before. Everything was so small and family. Nobody really cared about huge investments yet. Everything just popped off later down the line. Yeah, really magic days. Like, but still, everything happened in such a rush that you didn't even have time to reflect on anything you were doing. It was just like use this opportunity and get everywhere you can, and try to make connections and try to get partnerships with the projects you're building and all those kind of things. Yeah, but compared to back then, the vibe also on socials that I have on my timeline, I haven't read anything about NFT NYC except from Rizzle.
Yeah, that was how I learned about it. Was Rizzle in a chat on Discord saying like that there was an event or something, and I was like, oh yeah, maybe that is this week. Like I don't know, maybe it's like a problem of marketing or a problem of like lacking marketing dollars, but it just seems like
Probably, yes.
there's an issue of
But also
personal
attention,
investment. Yeah,
Yeah,
And
people
in
are
Twitter.
not there, and the attention isn't really there in NFTs right now. People are trading like with the remaining liquidity that they have. Everybody's waiting, obviously, for Bitcoin to move and then get back into the game. But like everybody's waiting, not sure if it like of the bear
yeah. But
market.
what
still
I'll just say
continues.
to that is like what we've seen there's something different here, right? We've been in NFT bear markets most of my time in this crypto art world, right? 2022 to certainly 23. The vibe wasn't, it may have been like defeated or fatalistic, but people were still present, right? Like
Yeah,
there was
that's
still
true.
there was still like a thirst to be together. You know, when we started doing the podcast, one of the first episodes is about like it's a two-parter about NFT NYC, and it was this very, as I remember it, it was a very encouraging and supportive experience, right? All these people who were in these like trying economic times, and they were kind of like together in that. And so I don't know if it's just about the lack
Yeah, you're right.
of like financialism. There's something else here, and maybe it's that like, you know, Untitled, you mentioned maturation of the space and the market, and like there is less participation. There's less desire for participation, opportunity for participation, right? Like,
Yeah,
you know,
there's less volunteerism. Like people expect to. There was a lot more volunteerism early on, and less about like. Now there's like incentivized social media, so you expect to be paid for the things that you contribute to something, and it's because it's not as like minty fresh and new. I think there's less willingness to be like, oh, like hell yeah, I want to go here because it's cool. And now it's like I have to go here because there's a financial like implication, and like it's I don't know, it's a little bit like, to me it feels it just doesn't have that same level of kind of like grassrootedness that it did, and it's not as imaginative. Like honestly, I think, I mean, even in the NFT PFP era of events, all those big PFPs, they were doing each their own like nightclub installation project. Doodles had this wild like huge playground that they installed indoors. Like all these big events, Bored Apes obviously did. I don't know what they had a yacht for real. I forget what they did. A huge concert, like, and then a handful of them just did really interesting. They're not my style, but they're really elaborate events.
But was it maybe like it was still funded with money raised in the bull market during the bear market that followed? Maybe it just like kind of dried up in a sense, or the investor said like, okay, like it didn't really work. And now we have another year of a bear market for NFTs, and they tell the projects like, just wait it out. Like, don't waste more money. Like, it didn't even have like any, like it didn't bring any financial traction last time you did it.
Yeah.
But still, like from the cultural and from the community standpoint, it obviously did something to the people who attended and like continue to spread the magic.
I mean, it was probably a mind share thing, right?
I mean, it's just like I remember, one year it was like all of the crypto org people had a house together in like Alphabet City in the East Village, and like it just seems inconceivable that 20 people from Argentina would fly to New York for an event this year. Like, I don't know. There's something undiagnosed, and I'm not sure that. And maybe it's a collective of everything that we're talking about.
I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like in the last few years, I feel like whenever I heard about NFT NYC and it wasn't in the context of, some very sort of blue chip artist stuff happening or some very, DeFi-ish stuff happening,
Mhm.
I feel like the more genuinely art focused satellite stuff that tended to come to my attention these last few years with NFT NYC, I feel like we're generally people complaining about, like how underwhelming it was or how shitty the setup was or how unprofessionally it was handled. Like,
But that's like the conference itself, right? Which I think, at least in our kind of dialectic in crypto art, is separate from this kind of, I don't know, more of a vibe. It's like a time and place determined by the conference. But most of the people that I spoke to in my times going in and around New York for the quote unquote for the conference had never actually set foot in the hall and weren't interested in it. It was more just like because the conference is here at this date, then Super Rare is going to do something. Then there's going to be something at a studio or a bunch of gallery shows. Like as Untitled said, there'll be like these clubs kind of rented out and people kind of just be coming and going. And because people are coming and going here,
there was a community thing going on.
Yeah,
I mean, we did a dinner, didn't we? We did an exhibition, a dinner. Like we had a really beautiful event. I'm pretty sure that was during NFT NYC, like 3 years ago.
That was a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I remember even meeting a couple collectors of mine, and Beeple had slyly kind of like created a treasure hunt, and all of a sudden I'm going taxi to taxi with a bunch of people who I've never met in person, and we're like trying to decipher these Twitter clues. It was like bizarre, but that kind of like energy is definitely dissipated. But yeah, actually, I don't think I've been into the conference itself probably since Renee, since I saw Renee. I don't know. It's complicated. I think it's hard.
Historic NFT Fest, I think, was good this year. I heard lots of positive things about that in Lisbon.
Yeah, I mean, Lisbon sounded like it had, maybe not quite the fullness of what you guys are describing, but it seemed to have some vibes.
Yeah, I mean, I saw people celebrating. I saw people getting together. I saw people looking at art and showcasing art. Like I was made aware of this, and perhaps for whatever reason, all 4 of our individual Twitter pages are algorithmically being stripped of their ability to see NFT NYC information. Maybe like they didn't, the organizers of the conference didn't pay their tribute to Elon Musk.
Elon.
So,
it could just be Twitter is awful, and like there are these amazing things happening, and it's like into a void.
Well, like I heard from like I heard from Judy Mam of Dada just being like, hey, how are you going to any of these events? And then as we mentioned, we had Rizzle in one of these like Discord chats being like, you want to come to this event? And like maybe it is all happening. Maybe we're all just weirdly like out of the loop and in a really like tragic and strange way. Feels unlikely, but possible, I suppose.
They're trying to isolate us.
It's a MOCA thing.
Like I'm checking, like we have like 145 views right now. NFT NYC's live has 377.
Oh wow.
See, that's not great. We
goodness.
we should not be having half of like that's.
We
That's-
also usually have more than that.
Well, we're slowly building up.
yeah, it's building up.
Only 25 minutes in, we'll be in the 200s.
Yeah, they are live for 40 minutes already. Like, so
Yeah.
we should 2x in 10 minutes. So then we've overtaken them.
I'm just I'm going to complain one more time, but I think maybe a couple more times. But there are not enough like virtual efforts towards virtual events and virtual conferencing. There's very little workshopping of that. It's like they tried it once in like 2020 briefly for a few events and then it just sort of died off. And I'm like, it's so bizarre to me for I generally struggle when I see digital art on like a computer screen frame in a white gallery. I just, to me, it's so much more interesting to get a bunch of like quirky avatars around and like experience it all at the same, in the same kind of unusual environment and native environment to digital media. I just feel like these physical events are fantastic, honestly. But I do think that I would hope that all of these event creators tried to be a little bit more imaginative with how they could extend their reach and do something more experimental digitally, virtually. It just we're still not seeing a lot of that, and to me, that's one of the reasons why this NFT, maybe broader NFT scene is kind of like struggling a little bit. Is there's very little experimentation. Everyone's just like OpenSea is another marketplace. They haven't really tried to innovate on anything new aside from a couple new features. There's like, why aren't we not trying to move the ball forward? Everyone's just folding into kind of a norm. And
well, I don't think people know what the move is forward, right? Like,
yeah,
I agree with you that like the metaverse digital gatherings are more interesting and they're certainly more thematically appropriate given like what this art is and how it wants to be seen and what we all are interested in. But we have talked a million times about how difficult it is to get a large audience on those platforms. Now, maybe the age of the large audience in this sphere is just dead, as indicated by the fact that we have half as many views as the NFT NYC live stream, which like awesome for the people watching. Like we appreciate you, but like that shouldn't be the case, right? We do not have that level of appeal. We don't want that level of appeal. We have not tried to scrape that level of appeal. So like I understand why all these people would be reticent to jump into something that's unproven. I guess where I agree with you, Untitled, is like, when did all of the big actors in this space become followers of like pre-given proof as opposed to innovators? Right? Like,
yeah.
does that make sense in the way I phrased it? I'm
Yeah.
not sure that was like super
Well, I think the answer is kind of dull and frustrating. Is that I think a lot of people just ran out of money, so they're less willing to experiment. Everyone has to be more conservative, and certainly if they have investors to listen to, they're going to be very conservative. To be fair, too, we've had so much like crazy stuff happen over the last 6 months that like if you're a company and you're looking to spend money and you're just generally not sure where the world is headed, like I do think like we are in a weird time right now. So if you're planning for a huge event and you're not sure where the world is headed, then that's a factor. But
That's true.
yeah.
But then also maybe like the fact that, for example, our community or also the WIP community, which will probably with their weekly show, which is happening, by the way, in 2.5 hours, they will have more viewers than what NFT NYC has now. I'm pretty sure about that. And the reason is that those are entirely organic communities without any money being thrown on the leverage that pours in people into the stream. And I think historically NFT NYC has been largely been grown and funded and like blown up due to like money that's being thrown at, I don't know, marketing campaigns, artists getting, I don't know, money for being displayed on these Times Square walls, and all these kind of things, I think, have led through more attention going through the events. While the whip has been probably way more consistent when you imagine a graph of viewers or active participants in the community during Bear and Bull.
Well, and to add on to that, Renee, think of like the investments too, to what you're saying of like all of these artists, curators, galleries, NFT projects, PFP project, whatever. They've invested a tremendous amount of money into infrastructure like this commercial infrastructure at Times Square to advertise. That all goes to advertising agencies. It all goes to real estate developers and kind of event owners and things like that. It's not reinvested back into kind of
right
like
out
an
of the
ecosystem.
community.
Yeah, like at least that's a lot of resources that just have like basically exited the ecosystem entirely. And that's not going to loop back. That's gone. So I think if we were smarter about this and could kind of self-invest in something a little bit more equitable for the whole ecosystem, I think that would have gone further. And but we decided to spend it on paying the same people that like Old Navy pays for their like March campaign. Like it doesn't. It's so weird. It's so
Old
weird.
Navy catching strays.
Yeah, imagine, we have the power and we talk about this thing that we can invest into the communities that are grassroots and that are like growing shoulder side by side, like shoulder to shoulder, side by side together and make the movement. And then somebody starts to launch whatever PFP project, which is not grassroots, and just, gets VC investments. Everything is like very sketchy and scammy and super like Web 2 native and not Web 3 grassroots native, and people throw the money into that NFT launch and like try to gamble a 10x over there instead of like continue to gamble or whatever, like invest in the ecosystems that would pour the money back into Web3 and not like take it from the table into the old world.
Yeah, I also want to like add on that, like it's not intelligent advertising and marketing what's happening. And my evidence for that is that like now that I've seen a couple of these events that have been going on, right, there are companies like Refraction and Reown and Abstract, which are, I've never heard of these before. And if I have, they're like I have these fleeting interactions with these companies, right? So like the business environment is fracturing and none of these companies seem to be able to get a kind of realistic market share of attention for what they're actually doing. There's so many chains, there's so many DeFi solutions, there's so many, wannabe marketplaces, there's so many regurgitated copies of everything because perhaps like the big actors have not solidified their place, right? Because OpenSea, everyone hates it. There's not a million, but there's many OpenSea competitors or would-be OpenSea competitors trying to like grab some of that market share. But none of them, at least to me, and I spend a lot of time online, like I feel like I should have an awareness of some of this stuff. None of them are really translating, right? And so it's not only that they're spending all this money on advertising and the Old Navy executives and, or not Old Navy executives, but Old Navy advertising at all. It's that like whatever they're doing isn't working and it's not reaching a lot of us down here.
Yeah, like to your point, we're in one of the most iconic and creative, energetic cities in the world. And in terms of creativity, in terms of creative campaigns that you can run in New York City, virally, grassroots, guerrilla marketing, whatever, or just OpenSea rents a big pirate ship and just rides it around every year. Like there's almost nothing creative that comes out of it. It just goes into the most bland and basic kind of options in Midtown. And it's like you have all of these wildly creative, very hyper visual projects. it does feel like as a branding effort, as a campaign effort, it's failed. It hasn't really.
Like,
It should, yeah.
you know who's done a really good job is like, and I have never purchased the product. I have no stake in it. Is like Wrecked drinks.
Oh yeah, they
Like
for sure.
I I remember what like things that they were doing, right? You mentioned scavenger rounds. Like I know they've done things like that. Like their branding has been, I don't even know how it gets to me, but like I'm aware of their brand, and so like they have a legitimacy in my eyes, and I'm not totally sure how they've accomplished that, but like at least some kind of creative marketing, at least marketing blitz, at least the right partners. Like
Yeah,
it just does not seem like any. I don't want to say any. That's unfair, but to my eye, there's just not that level of creativity to drum up a level of interest, which then drums up a level of legitimacy. And so we end up with a lot of uninteresting, illegitimate seeming entities. And of course, we all know how tenuous a business position is in crypto at large, let alone crypto art. So you see these names pop up and they all boast, so many of them boast about the same thing. They're revolutionary. They're fixing this. They're doing this, you know, using whatever buzzwords of the day are their Old Navy advertisers deem appropriate. And then they fade away into the night as quickly as they came because they either like blow up and use all their money up front, or they do nothing interesting and just slowly bleed cash. And it seems like those are the two ways that we've kind of seen this go for the most part. And so it makes it seem, I don't know. Well, if I may just add another thing to that, like a lot of these companies in the past have tried to achieve some kind of cultural legitimacy, whether they have like, you know, performances from musicians of note or exhibitions of artists of note, but lacking that, I think. You know, a company, one of these random names that I mentioned before that I don't know what they do, but pick one of them, right? If they were doing an art exhibition with artists that I knew, artists in our circle, like we might be interested in going to those things and seeing them and then learning more about the brand. It's just, I don't know. There's a breakdown here of, it seems like there's a breakdown from the business side of like who actually is within the space and who is incentivized to then support the space. Like the more you appeal to these traders and commercialized individuals, the commercialized audience, like those people don't have a stake in what's going on here. They don't have a deeper stake. They don't have any intrinsic motivation. So as soon as money dries up or money is not immediately present, or they can't gain influence or attention or X, Y, Z from going to one of these things, there's no point, right? It's a very fragile audience. The crypto art people, for all that we represent and all that we've been ignored, are incredibly loyal and, you know, will travel, you know, have connections, have influence to assign to larger entities and also to peddle. And it seems like the forsakening of crypto art from a larger kind of crypto audience, and just like with a crypto culture that this place is kind of the nexus of and the core of, is a bad business decision. It's very short-term thinking.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Like we've talked about this before at different levels, but creating a business model in an emerging industry is difficult, and it just runs against the grain in a lot of cases of like, you know, people are just trying to figure out what's sticky, who the audience ultimately is. And yeah, I don't know. I do think like there's a lot more skill set kind of within the ecosystem that should be more collaborative. You should see things happening this week, like protocols hiring operator to do a dance performance on the L train. You know, there's something like creative, interesting, viral, and exposing. You know what I mean? Like there should be more overlap and connection, because there's a tremendous amount of skill within this entire ecosystem. It's just still very people are unsure of. It's still new, I think, and people are still figuring out what their business is and who ultimately is the client or who is the customer. It's tricky, but with all the art involved in NFTs inherently, you'd hope that there would be a little bit more like, you know, virality to events and things that they would be investing into in the city, because man, there's so many eyeballs here, but people,
I mean, this is part of the problem of like coalescing the influence of crypto art around a smaller subset of people is that there's less influence to go around, right? You can only have, like, if you want to take 70% of the cultural capital of crypto art and place it in X copy, like, that's great. And for the 80 to 400 X copy holders, that's wonderful. But when there's now only 30% influence left, 30% name recognition left to go around to all these artists, and then all of these influence peddlers and influence seekers are looking to capitalize on that influence in a way which is going to trickle down and then kind of blow out crypto art or have some kind of tangible positive effect on crypto art, there's just less of a market to do so. We get smaller and smaller. Okay, now we have less and less artists of note because they have been given less note and less attention by these market makers. Their influence, what it is, or their large influence as large as it is. And how many of them are going to travel? How many of them are going to align themselves with this brand? How many of them have, first look deals with this place as opposed to this place? Like, there's just less influence to go around and be capitalized on in a way which is good for whoever wants that influence and is good for the artists. So, like, it's an unintended side effect of,
consolidating
on basket. Yeah.
It's just, I think that's the traditional art market. It's just kind of like becoming more consolidated around certain figures that have a more proven record, and there's less risk.
Well, this is the danger for super rare, right? Is like, I think they're making a calculated risk to put a lot of their business around the name and support of X copy. But at a certain point, if their business model is around X copy minting and X copy secondary sales, and there's not any of either because the X copies are going to go in the hands of people who want to hold them or willing to value them more, and X copy is not minting as much for whatever reason, who knows? Maybe, I don't know. Maybe X copy gets Lyme disease and doesn't mint for a year and a half, right? Like, stupid shit like that. Is the entire business model of super rare crumble because there's nobody to like fill that void? That's the bet you make. And if you're gonna go all in on black and it turns red, like, that's the danger. Maybe that's what we're seeing with NFT NYC, is they went all in on black. There's a fly trying to get in my coffee right now. Sorry. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's something problematic here.
Yeah. There's something missing. I think part of it too is, to Super Rare's credit, it does. I really do like some of the lineup of the artists that they've had in recent shows. I think it is starting to branch out. I don't know if that results in sales or not necessarily in these cases, but I do think, like, New York is also a very, very difficult place to have. Like, if you were to do the same thing in a smaller town, less expensive rent, you might have a better return. If, like, New York is tricky, it's expensive, but I don't know. I do think, like, hopefully in the future we see more. I don't know. We just see more. I just want to see more experimental, cool shit happen during this week, and if anything that the NFT legacy leaves, hopefully it is that there becomes like it kind of, I'm sure it'll go in ebbs and flows. Hopefully next year is a little bit more invigorating and a little bit different, but it would be cool to see more experimental and cross collaborative kind of work happen. We'll see.
I'd like to, if we can, just for the last like 10 minutes here, just change gears a little bit, because I would love to get everyone's opinion on the ruling in favor of Anthropic this past week. The U.S. appeals, I think, federal court, I'm not sure if it was appellate or not, but the federal court ruling that Anthropic using a whole host of books and other copyrighted material to train their models is legal under fair use doctrine, which is the first, to my knowledge, and this is very surprising to me, the first, to my knowledge, admission by a nation state actor, especially on the size and influence level of the US, that models training data can use basically whatever they want, as long as it's as long as it's acquired initially legally, because there was some problem with like them pirating audio or pirating ebooks and using that to train. That's besides the point. I just wonder if anybody has opinions on that, or
I mean, thank God,
Not all
like
at once.
finally. Um, I think, you know, the backlash against AI stuff, as much as, you know, parts of it are understandable, um, it it has been like feeling crazy to me. Like, I don't know, the idea that we should stop obvious, available, there for the taking, revolutionary technological progress because, you know, Disney fucked up the, you know, IP rights system over the past 100 years, and, you know, now, I don't know, Tim living in his mom's basement thinks that his, you know, deviant art pictures are being stolen by OpenAI. Like, that's all kinds of batshit crazy to me. Like, clearly these models are not using, you know, the copyrighted material in a way that like meaningfully just copies them. Clearly they're using it in, you know, a complex, transformative way that, you know, certainly isn't the same as a human being, you know, learning from something, but is absolutely legitimately analogous to a human being learning from something. And like, we've seen, especially by now, but like even a year or two ago, we've already seen that this whole thing is taking us somewhere that is going to, and I keep saying this, is going to have most like sci-fi written in the past century feeling anachronistic in like 10 or 20 years, because, you know, even as we still might not have flying cars, and, you know, we haven't spread across half the known galaxy, we are definitely going to have like, you know, AI and sort of AI utilizing shit that blows a lot of things that, you know, are in sci-fi stories meant to take place like centuries from now, just straight out of the water. So I think, you know, a ruling like that is long overdue. Hopefully it sticks and stays and, you know, gets reaffirmed. And, you know, my sort of secondary thought is, as happy as I am about it, I almost feel like it's arguably simultaneously also irrelevant, because the ruling could have gone the opposite way, and the US could, you know, ban all AI tomorrow, and like the rest of the world wouldn't fucking stop working on it, and the progress wouldn't stop, and nobody would give a shit that, you know, American lawyers are throwing hissy fits in, you know, New
Well,
York or even
yeah.
in the Supreme Court about what's going on.
So, I mean, a couple things off that. Like, we may see this same ruling appealed and then reversed, and it may go to the Supreme Court and it may be reversed. Like, who knows? But I think that
Yeah.
you bring up an incredibly important point, which is that jurisdictions about what is legal and what is not legal are going to change. They're going to be variant by country, right? Like, you will have, I think, more generally conservative-minded countries with like conservative judges, because for whatever reason this has become a progressive conservative issue about like AI proliferation. But AI rights, I suppose you can say, like ruling towards Anthropic, will be more common, I believe, in like places like the US, and probably less common in places like Europe. And that will be very interesting in terms of what products are released to the public, right? Will ChatGPT, for instance, will Claude, for instance, be fundamentally different as an experience to use in England versus in the US, right? You know, ruling the other way on this issue is not like, it's like an existential thing, right? If ruling the other way that these AI companies need to pay the copyright essentially for all of the works that they've been trained on is essentially like bankrupting them. There's no way that if you're going to make a legal precedent that these claims are all legitimate, that every copyright claim is legitimate, as long as you can prove that this information was used to train the system, and then these companies need to be transparent with what they've trained on, then they're going to go bankrupt. or they'll completely exit a given market. There's a world in which like these AI companies are not used in Europe, right? These large AI models are not used in Europe because they move too fast, and the legal powers that be say, no, you actually have to pay these copyright claims or you can't exist in this market. And that is how this goes. And that like basically everywhere you go, every country you go to, or maybe there's even like blocks, a la like the Cold War. It would be like an iron curtain behind which there's a completely different set of like AI tools and AI abilities. And that's I know that kind of sounds like sci-fi and a little bit like of an over prognostication.
No, but I mean, I could see it happening in the short term, or well, relatively short term. Like I could see that being, the case maybe for a few decades. I don't see it lasting in the long run. And just quickly to jump in, the copyright, paying for copyright stuff thing. I mean, technically, I would think there's a third way it could go, which is very stupid, but honestly, I think it has real world analog in like the how SMS messages were handled with cell phone providers. You could technically have AI companies forced into disclosing everything they train on, and like figuring out like residual percentages that they need to send to whoever else. Maybe not them individually sending out to tens or hundreds of thousands of separate claimants, but maybe handled in some other way. But I guess my point about a solution like this is common sense would suggest that this would be a really stupid thing to do, because surely the administration of such a system would cost more than any sort of benefit anybody could possibly draw out of it. And yet, that was again the case with SMS messages, which have such a marginal cost, that originally, like earliest on, I believe they were actually free, because companies recognized that it would cost them more to sort of track and bill for it than it costs them to provide the service. And then of course they realized that it's digital stuff and they can charge arbitrarily high amounts and more than recoup the money.
It's just it's tricky, and what you're going to see if we rule, or if there's a more comprehensive ruling across like legal prefectures and up the court system, is huge unions of creatives forming, and like companies, it'll just become so commonplace to see like this work may not be used to train an AI model as like an all rights reserved.
But that shit is already so common. Like go onto Itch.
Yeah, but it'll be everywhere. It'll be in everything. Like we're going to see a fundamental reconfiguration of all work that has existed. Now, maybe again, like Daim, I totally trust your opinion over mine, but like maybe that's already happened. But like the backlash to that, especially from a public that still distrusts AI, like blanket, but especially when it comes to like creativity, I don't know. It's just going to be, it's very interesting to just be at the very first kind of like step to what is either way, like a very wishy-washy, strange, and probably like pretty volatile emotional situation.
It's
but I mean, also, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Well, I was just going to say, you saying you can't use my work for training AI is like, like what is that?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of
right?
like
that's a copyright notice, which if your country has a copyright law and the country of the other person, has the same law or has, some treaty with your country and respects that law, then maybe that counts for something. But with, can't use this for training AI, like that's not shit in every country's legislation around the world.
Yeah.
Like that's going to be largely meaningless for a long ass time. Especially when you consider that, you know, most countries around the world have probably more important things to do than, you know, enshrine in law that random ass, you know, internet creatives, you know, publicly freely available, I don't know, drawings shouldn't be stuffed into an AI training process. Like,
it's true.
I think it's a great point. We should return to this
Yeah.
topic once we see a little bit more, I don't know, unravel itself. But it's just about one. I think it's probably a good time to wrap up. I think we covered a lot. I really appreciate talking to you all as usual. Any last words anybody wants to say, or should we just kick off?
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Daim Untitled, Renee,
Thank you,
thank you very
guys.
much. Thank you everyone for watching. Brookhawk, thanks for hanging out with us in the chat. We'll see you all next Thursday. Please.
And in 2 hours at the whip.
Yeah.
And 2 hours at the whip meetup.
Go to the
See
whip.
Untitled and Renee there. Cool. Thank you all very much. Have a great one.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Guys.